450 million claims are denied each year, but fewer than 2% are ever appealed. And though the majority of those appeal denials are overturned, only 2% are ever appealed. What's up with that? And what can be done to even up the odds? We'll find out on this episode of ShiftShapers.
Change either energizes or paralyzes. The choice is yours. This is the ShiftShapers podcast, bringing the employee benefits industry interviews with individuals and companies who are shaping the industry shifts. And now, here's your host, David Saltzman.
To help us answer that question, we've invited Neal Shah, chairman and co-founder of a new company that's looking to solve that problem or help consumers solve that problem called Counterforce Health. Welcome, Neal.
Thanks for having me, David.
It's our pleasure. We always like to start out talking about what your journey is. How do you get to be doing what you're doing? Because almost nobody's got a straight line. Like nobody woke up one morning in their crib and said, I want to be in the insurance business. How'd you get here?
Yeah, sure. So I actually have a completely squiggly line to get here. Most recently, I have actually been running one of the largest and fastest growing elder care platforms in America called Care Health Technologies. We're caring for thousands of older adults across the country, many of whom are living with dementia. And then to give you kind of like the full backstory, most of my career up until my mid-30s, I was in the finance business and I was a hedge fund manager. I actually experienced a tremendous care needs within my own family, starting in my early 30s of taking care of my grandfather through dementia, kidney failure, cancer, and serious illness, and then end-of-life care, where I really coordinated a lot of the care, but really my mom left her career to be his full-time caregiver. And at that point, really opened my eyes to how broken kind of our healthcare and home care industry is in the country. And then I became kind of obsessed with the care economy, broadly speaking, and the patient experience and the family caregiver experience. And at that time, I was still very focused on running my fund. I'd worked really hard all my 20s and 30s, and I'd become a partner at a multi-billion-dollar fund. And then I'd been fortunate enough to have one of those investors back me, and I was running my own $250 million fund. So I wasn't prepared to kind of leave to do this. But then at the peak of my fund, in my mid-30s, my wife became severely ill and went through years of a cancer battle. And at that point, I kept taking several sabbaticals from running my fund to be her full-time caregiver. And ultimately, I actually had to make the difficult decision to wind down my fund to become her full-time caregiver for a couple of years because I thought it would make a huge impact on her ultimate outcome and recovery, which, knock on wood, it did. She's now been in remission for a few years. And I think that's in no small part to just managing her care very closely. And at that point, I left behind my finance career and decided to start a care company. I thought that the home care market in the country was really broken. I wanted to make innovations to improve it. And so I started Care, which has now become one of the fastest growing startups, helping care for people in their homes and connecting them with great caregivers who are all college students going into the healthcare field. We did that. And then that whole journey and really seeing what my experience was and my wife's experience was as a patient with the system and how many times we fought denied health insurance claims for legitimate treatments and procedures and medications that were needed during a difficult and dark journey of cancer. And then in 3 years of running Care and seeing how many people at varying illnesses, starting with dementia, terminal cancer, kind of many other chronic conditions are facing this kind of insurance battle, them and their family caregivers. I think that really inspired me in recent months to start Counterforce Health. I thought that there was a huge gap in the market, nothing built to improve the patient experience, as well as geared towards small clinics. And I thought that there was a huge opportunity. So that's been kind of it's been really a personal journey and then also recently a professional journey of seeing just where there are gaps in the market.
It's unsurprising how many entrepreneurs get into trying to solve a problem because they've experienced it themselves. With all due respect to Simon Sinek, I don't think a lot of people start with why. I think they find their why, but I think they start with why not. Why isn't there a way to solve this problem? Why isn't there a way to do this easier? And just for our listeners and viewers on YouTube, we will do a second interview with Neal all about Care, but that's CareYaya.org, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. If you want to go, get a jump on our podcast. If not, we'll be talking to Neal again soon about that. But today, we're talking all about Counterforce Health. And when we first talked about this, Neal, one of the things you did was you used an analogy of a restaurant and meals and whatnot. Can you share that with the audience?
Yeah, I wrote an article about it recently, that kind of put out on LinkedIn Pulse of, can you imagine if somebody sells you a subscription that you can eat at a restaurant or other restaurants twice a week for a year and, pay me a couple $1,000 a year and you can enjoy this privilege. And then you show up and they're like, oh, actually, no, you can't eat today. Like, do you actually need food? Oh, we're only serving this and this, and I think that's kind of like, that's been the real, people really need to distill what health insurance is to kind of, other analogies of things they might use in life, like subscription services for food, subscription services for meal delivery, where if you pay up front and then when you go to capitalize on like, okay, I need this and you don't get it, that's basically what I think modern American health insurance has kind of turned into, especially during moments of extreme duress that people are under, whether it's they're managing care for a mother or father through dementia, or they're managing care for a spouse through cancer. These are not situations where you want to deal with financial stress and existential stress of like, am I going to be able to get this? That's why you're paying. During good times you're paying, so during bad times you can kind of have the coverage.
Sure.
And I think then people are really shocked that they can't get it when they need it.
Well, because, as we've said frequently on the program, there's only three things you can do with risk. You can keep it, you can take it, you can share it rather, or you can give it away. And, to a certain extent, you expect that you've given it away and you shouldn't have to deal with all this nonsense on the back end. So we talked a little bit about the number of claims that are denied, 450 million claims. Is that claims like of all types?
Of all types, yeah. I mean, I think basically the statistic from the American Hospital Association is that 1 in 5 American adults with health insurance have had a denied claim within the last year, right? Shocking. I think the other interesting statistic is that about 10 to 15 years ago, the average denial rates at many large insurers were less than 2%. And now they've turned into anywhere from 15 to 25%. And, that was kind of Kaiser Family Foundation had put out a detailed research report on it. So it's that a lot of people are experiencing this issue. And the issue has gotten notably worse in the last 5 to 10 years. The third interesting statistic is that when they surveyed physicians, as recently as 2022, something like 23% of physicians said claims denials are a major problem for me. And then from 2022 to 2024, when the survey was done, now 74% of physicians are saying claims denials has become a big problem. So this has been growing kind of throughout the 2010s and the early 2020s, which I have a theory on that, related to kind of Obamacare and a variety of other things. But it has skyrocketed in the last 3 years. And I believe that is fully on the part of AI and weaponization of AI by health insurance companies. And asymmetric warfare, where patients and providers don't have it.
Conversation that's going on with United Healthcare, and they're kind of in the front of that, but there are others as well. So I'm interested. You mentioned that you have a theory about why this has skyrocketed. Would you share that with us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the theory is multifold. One, I think Obamacare, while it may have been a well-intentioned policy to get more people covered, in reality, it became a big kind of boost to private health insurance and really for-profit health insurance, right? Like getting a lot more people on insurance plans, combined with a relatively lax approach to regulation and specifically antitrust and mergers, created this kind of like monster. And if you kind of think about like, many times you may think, who really benefited from Obamacare? And you can say, yes, you could say, sure, people who didn't have coverage before or whatever. But if you look back at the policy 15 years, it's almost like United Healthcare could have written that policy, because how did they benefit? Twofold. One, they got a lot of customers. They got kind of risk covered where government paid them out if there was too much risk. You force people to buy private health insurance for profit. And then you allowed a series of mergers with no check or regulation. So these guys could not only gobble up other insurers, but kind of go and vertically integrated and buy up PBMs and other parts of the healthcare value chain and buy up physician practices. So I think that Obamacare was kind of like the start of it, in my opinion, of like you can see insurance claim denial rates and how the insurance industry is operating, because it's been around since 60 plus years before. But starting in the early 2010s, which is just happens to be coincidental with when Obamacare passes, the behavior starts going a little bit off kilter, right? Where it's like, okay, denial rates start rising. Then mergers start happening like crazy. And then now you have it where like, between a handful of, 4 or 5 guys, United, Humana, Cigna, whatever, they effectively control the market. You don't have a lot of choice. And depending on what employer you are or what state you're in, sometimes you're limited to a handful of choices. So market share concentration has gotten absurd. Then many of them have vertically integrated in other parts of the healthcare value chain. So, they're kind of like flexing power on even what physicians are able to do, what pharmacies are able to do, et cetera. So I think that it has been like really a complete regulatory and market failure that's resulted in this kind of like, almost like, I wouldn't even call this capitalism. Like I'm a hardcore capitalist, but like capitalist in the sense of free markets and competition. I would consider this almost like crony capitalism, where a handful of mega companies are kind of taking part of the regulatory infrastructure to then flex market power and then keep competition out, and then also have no responsibility to consumer, who's the ultimate end buyer, and then using a government as a way to force people into their product. So yeah, I think it's an absolute disaster. So I think, and it's bipartisan, right? I think it's not Democrat or Republican. I think there have been tons of administrations, obviously not just at the presidential level, but even, people in Senate and Congress, kind of like thinking about what to do about insurance. But yeah, I think it's been a bipartisan complete disaster. And I think that's going to have to change.
Interesting. I wish I could disagree with you, but I unfortunately can't. And I've been around this for 40 plus years, and I've run TPAs, I've paid claims. I see the correlation and causation both, and it's frightening, because if you take this out on a line, where are we going to end up, and is something just going to implode as we go along? But let's get back to Counterforce. So you saw this problem up close and personal, especially with your wife's struggle, and you decided, okay, there's got to be a better way to get people to easily appeal claims. What does Counterforce do? Is it aimed at the patient or the physician or both? Give us a little background. And I know you're using AI to craft the solution. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think you started the interview with kind of like the statistic that I thought was like, the most capturing, right? It's like less than a few % of people appeal claims, right? So there's so many denied claims across America, in the hundreds of millions. Something like 49 million individuals have had a claim denied within the last year. And depending on which stat you read, it's like some people say 2%, some people say 1% that actually bother appealing. So vast majority of people are not appealing. If you kind of get into the reasons why, it's really 70% of people don't fully know their appeal rights, so they don't know they can do it or how to do it, things like that. 40% of people say they're too intimidated or lack the time or the resources or expertise to do it. So, and of course there's an overlap, like 70 plus 40 is more than 100, right? So some don't know how to do it, and some of those are also, I don't know who to get for help. So we kind of thought there's two things you could do here. You could do mass public awareness combined with tools to make it as easy as possible or one click as possible. So what is the current appeal process like for most people? Let's say the 70% of people are like, I don't know how to do it, I'm too scared. For the people that do know how to do it are like, okay, I can try. I feel like you need to have a doctor in your family to sit down and do hours and hours of research. To fix, billing codes are 24% of denied claims are because incorrect billing code. Another 40% are due to medical necessity. So billing codes are something that you could look up in billing code databases, fix yourself, right? That's something theoretically the insurance company should, theoretically maybe even fix for you. But, it's maybe a frivolous reason to deny. So that is something where if you had a doctor in your family, you could do it. If you had the time and the bandwidth, you can go search databases, you can use AI yourself. But most people are intimidated, they won't do it. Especially most people who are like less affluent, maybe less educated in more rural areas. They're going to be like, I don't know how to navigate this stuff, right? So there's a health and a tech literacy component to that of why people aren't appealing. And then it happens that those are probably the people who can least afford to have the thing denied. So that's a perfect use case for somebody doing it for them. And then medical necessity, that's one where you have to kind of go get doctors to detailed cite why something is needed, pull references from medical journals or other cases and say this treatment is needed for XYZ. And that's another thing where most kind of lay people will be like, I lack the expertise to. So over the last several months, we built a set of AI tools, training them on a lot of databases of seeing what successful appeals have worked, which things have even gone to independent review, which have worked, even training it on legal databases that have things all the way gone to court, and then learned successful appeal strategies and been able to real-time access journals and medical literature databases, as well as billing code databases, to say, for any person who comes in, whether in a rural area, urban area, uneducated person, minimally educated, or super well educated, you could even be a doctor yourself, come into Counterforce Health and upload your policy document, upload your denial letter, upload any relevant information, and just one click, and sit there, and in less than 2 minutes, a super detailed, well-crafted 8+ pages appeal letters with detailed citations will be done for you at no cost. Yeah, we run it completely for free, by the way. It's a social mission. I really just wanted to offer it to individuals for free. So, that I think can't be beat. I think a lot of individuals, even if they had a brother that's a doctor, might still have their brother take 6 hours, 10 hours to write something like that, and we can do it with AI in a matter of seconds. It having trained on tons and tons of databases, absorb really good information, and then to your point about who the users are, believe it or not, clinics are also using it, and ultimately that'll be the path to sustainability. Is that we find many clinics, especially small practices. We don't kind of like initially start and gear towards big hospitals. I think a lot of them are trying to do this stuff in-house, and good for them. They need to be. But there's many, we have a rheumatologist. It's 2 doctors running a small practice here in a small town in North Carolina. And they see tons of patients, and they're averaging something like 35 to 40 denials per week. And they have one administrative person that handles kind of scheduling, billing, payments, et cetera. And then whenever she has time, she will write a few appeal letters. And, I was talking to her, a couple of weeks ago, and she was like, yeah, I typically will write maybe 3-4 letters if I can per week. It takes me a couple hours each. It's a lot of work, and she has a full-time job doing other stuff. This is an example where they started coming to Counterforce Health. Now she's writing 40 appeal letters a week, kind of like this. And she would say they're better than what she was writing by herself because they're much more detailed and kind of much better cited. So I think that's really kind of the power of AI. I really believe that democratizing access to this, it's like if the insurers have weaponized AI, it's now time to provide individual patients and small clinics the same weapon to fight back, because I think it's been asymmetric warfare until now.
And now, a word from our sponsor. You're not just an advisor, you're a game changer. Forget cookie-cutter off-the-shelf solutions. That's yesterday's news. It's 2025, and it's all about delivering bold, custom-crafted plans that truly make a difference. At the core is a razor-sharp self-insured framework, but the real magic? That's in the high-impact point solutions you strategically layer in to slash costs and supercharge member outcomes. But let's be real. That's where the headaches start. Hours wasted sifting through endless options, wrestling with integration issues, and fighting data sharing roadblocks. It's a time suck, and it's holding you back. Not anymore. Meet Benepower, the AI-powered game changer that builds killer plans in minutes, not hours. Benepower doesn't just curate the best point solutions, it makes them work together seamlessly, streamlining communication and driving collaboration like never before. With Benepower, you're armed with an end-to-end AI-enabled solution that makes you unstoppable. Spend less time piecing together a patchwork plan and more time selling. Your clients get unmatched ROI, and you become the go-to advisor that everyone's talking about. Want to take your game to the next level? Visit benepower.ai or schedule a demo at info@benepower.com. Find your power with Benepower. And now, back to our conversation. I know you guys are early in the process. Are you keeping stats with users? Are you asking them for feedback on what the percentage of claims that get denied or are overturned when they use the system?
Yes. Yeah. So we're keeping stats, and so far it's like surprisingly good. Now there might be like an adverse selection bias where like people who are more intending to fight come to the thing, but on average, it's averaging over 70%, like 72% as of last stat, which is like surprisingly good. I think average appeal win rates in the country, depending on which stat you look at, are somewhere like 40 to 50%. So there's already kind of an incentive of if you simply bother to write a letter. Even if you don't use Counterforce Health, write it yourself, do whatever, right? Use ChatGPT, I don't care. Just bother doing an appeal, you'll win 40 to 50% of the time. Then the better the appeal letter is, the more you'll win. So yeah, like it's really cool to see 70% plus win rate. I mean, that's unbelievable, right? And it's like billing code error related appeals. I mean, those are extremely, extremely easy to fix and address. And there it's just a matter of taking the time to do it. Medically necessary, a little bit harder. In many cases, it just won't be done. But again, easy enough to address. And then there's sometimes back and forth. But what we find in many situations is that people, just due to inertia and intimidation, were just simply not bothering to do it. And then post-care denials are even, I mean, I think those are, terrible, right? Like where people have these $100 bills, $200 bills where insurers just like frivolously denying. And most people are like, yeah, I'll just pay it out. I was talking to a lady actually that we helped through our care platform, living with a metastatic breast cancer in her mid 70s. And she's been, taking this one routine med for the last couple of years, $50 a month. And it got denied. And this is before she knew about Counterforce, and she just paid it. And I was like, why'd you pay that? Like, why didn't you bother? And she's like, well, she's like calculating. She's like, yeah, the stress of writing a letter, the stress of researching, fighting. She's like, I just don't want to deal with all that. I'm already going through cancer. I'm thinking about how much longer I got. So she just kind of said it's easier to pay the $50. So it's like those things, in my opinion, that should be a close to 100% win rate. Because in my opinion, these are just frivolous denials that insurers are doing to see if they can get away with it and just pocket the money. But people don't have tools. If you had a thing that spits out a letter in 1 minute, then sure, that's worth $50 of your time. So, I like it building innovations like that.
Well, what's interesting is the post-care denials are particularly stinging, I think, because as one of our guests over the last couple of years coined the term, we've created people who are functionally uninsured. They may have an ID card in their wallet, but deductibles and personal responsibility amounts have gotten so high and convoluted that they're out of pocket for a bunch of money anyway. And so you're taking a population that can least afford to have these claims denied because they don't have avenues, they don't have huge savings, maybe they don't have credit card availability or whatever, and they're getting saddled with this debt. And that the initial study back years ago from I think Steffi Woolhandler when she was at Harvard about medical bankruptcy was kind of questioned, but there have been a couple of new studies about the number of bankruptcies that are caused by medical debt. And if you can overturn some of this stuff, it'll make a huge difference in people's lives. And I'm interested to hear that you're doing it as a passion project.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, it's a passion project that's actually turning into a startup. Like we've been approached by a bunch of venture investors. People kind of realize there's like a twofold thing that you can make, and we really, all our innovations are like impact innovation. So even Care.ai itself, it's not like a traditional kind of like venture funded caregiving company. We're all backed by impact innovators. So Care.ai itself has funding from the American Heart Association, AARP, as well as several other smaller impact investors. And I think same thing with Counterforce Health. We're being approached by impact investors like that who want to build something sustainable, but aren't really sitting there trying to profit maximize and are just like, okay, as long as it can survive on its own. So, kind of like the model is free to people indefinitely. Like we spent upfront costs building it. The ongoing cost is not very high. And then really clinics as they see value. And really from a clinical perspective, it's revenue cycle management, right? That a lot of the denials, especially post-care denials, will end up going into collections. Something like 10 to 15% of those will just not be paid. And then that's a problem for the clinic that they're going to lose. If you kind of like do the math on these couple of providers experiencing 50 a week, just even if averaging is $200 over the course of a month and seeing 200, 300 denials, that's going to be, $40,000+. And if 15% of those go to collections, that's a disaster, right? That's a multi-$1,000 problem per month. So over time, from a sustainability pathway, it's going to be, okay, well, places like that say, hey, it's worth 5% of my, kind of like how much revenue I'm capturing back to spend on a product like this. So, I'd say early conversations there, but like no real pressure to monetize. But I think investors really see the potential. And I think that passion project can turn into something huge because I do believe from a patient side, if you charge, it's tough, because now all of a sudden you have people who are already hesitating or don't want to fight it. And then you say, hey, $5 to use this. People are gonna be like, nah. Even if it's on a success base, I just feel like charging one isn't the right thing to do. And I'll say from the inside, not to market against myself, but the cost is not very high. The cost per generation is fairly low. It's a fixed cost business that requires a lot of software development up front, and it requires constant training and retraining of models. But the variable cost of the business is absurdly low. So you want to just go for maximum usage and maximum scale. And I think that's also how you can make maximum impact. So, yeah.
Well, and I think you're right. I think, it's a good deed to do it on a public basis, but the sustainability is really going to be at the doctor's office level and at the clinic level. I cannot tell you, how often I hear it too. The system is broken. No, the system's not broken. The system is working perfectly.
Yeah.
It was just never designed to work for you.
Yeah.
And so if revenue cycle management is one thing, but certainly the 30% that they reclaim on claims that go into collection would more than pay for somebody to do this if they had a system to do it. And I love the idea of, okay, you're using AI, here's AI back at you.
Yep. Agreed. And I didn't even get to the most fun part. The other AI, and I'll send you a video of this if you want to include in the YouTube, is we even fully built a voice AI and even a video avatar AI that's in beta right now, but some people are using, because just sending the letter, faxing that or mailing that isn't where the battle stops. Everybody knows you got to get on the phone with these insurance companies, waste a ton of time on calls, right? You see all these patient advocates doing this on behalf of people, right? And, so we were like, you can even AI that. So we built Maxwell, which is a voice AI assistant that actually the goal is upload all this stuff, generate the letter, and then have sick Maxwell on the insurance company, and he'll call the insurer on your behalf and deal with the process for you of just like wasting time with the claims and billing people. And I think that is interesting because they've deployed AI bots. So, whenever you call insurers, and we do this all the time, just as like a passion project where we have people using our thing. And if it's like a massive claim, we're like, okay, let us help you manually, just kind of for learning and for fun. And, you call one of these insurers on behalf of someone and you spend minutes and minutes going through for AI bot conversation. Then you get the rep on the line. The rep is just wasting your time asking the same questions. This is another perfect use case of AI because the insurers have weaponized voice AI on you, and you can weaponize it back and say, okay, my AI, Maxwell, is going to call. And then one click the whole thing. The benefit there is if you're a cancer patient, you're somebody living with dementia, you're somebody who really doesn't have the resources or the ability to handle all the stress to manually fight this back, you can just have kind of the AI do it for you. And I think that that's going to be a big thing of AI agents. I know a lot of people have been talking about this, but I think in these kind of fields, from a consumer standpoint, not enough people have developed AI agents. And I think that's really the opportunity of have the AI do as much of the grunt work and the dirty work for you. And I think at that point, it makes it more of a fair fight.
What a fascinating journey you're on. I do hope as you grow out, you'll come back and we'll talk some more about all of this. And we will do another separate episode about Care Yaya and what it does, because people who are caregivers are the unrecognized heroes in healthcare. And it is a huge burden and sometimes can become as debilitating for the caregiver as it can for the people who are receiving care. And so we're more than happy to have you back to talk about that. Neal Shah, chairman and co-founder of Counterforce Health. Neal, thanks so much for a fascinating conversation.
Thanks for having me, David. Really appreciate it.
I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor and our producer, Hatcher Media. Hey, if you need podcast production or professional graphic design, Josh Hatcher's the expert to contact. For more information, visit him at hatchermedia.net. That's HATCHER media.net.
This ShiftShapers podcast is copyrighted content and may not be reproduced in whole or in part without the express written permission of ShiftShapers Solutions, LLC. Copyright 2024.